So what I wanted to talk about was, I'll start with this question. Did you know that there's a downside to thinking that you know? Maybe you don't. A friend of mine I think she's a pretty well-known Buddhist teacher now, and she's a psychologist. And I remember when she said, when she was talking about she and her husband, who's I think a psychiatrist, and how they'd have arguments and stuff, and how they'd work through it. And I think she said something like then they'd remember to do their favorite mantra. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. And it really cracked me up. I thought, oh, what a wonderful mantra. I could be wrong. Wow. How many believers are lucky enough to come to the place of intelligence, of true intelligence, where they could actually say that? Unfortunately, not enough. The advantage of not being a believer is that you get to find out. And that's when life is a discovery and a mystery and a journey, rather than a suffering nightmare. I'm going to repeat all that because it's really my main point today. And there's a few little extras to go with it in a minute, I think. Yeah. You know, when you can have a sense of humor about it, that's a really good sign. Sometimes it's just not possible, and I get that. Sometimes it's just, and I've been there countless times, honestly, in this life, where a lot of my life I was very alone, very isolated, 100% misunderstood. And I had many, many times of great doubt and pain where I didn't want it to continue. The first time that came to a profound intensity was when I was led to that experience I had at 16 that, unknown to me, produced enlightenment, which I was told about years later. And I didn't even know it because I was still a very screwed up, challenged 16-year-old. No, it didn't change that one bit. If anything, it made it more poignant that I had a lot of work to do in myself. That became very clear very quick when I started finding out about things like meditation. I never heard the word. I never didn't, none of these things, I found out about things that made me realize that I was a mess, a complete mess, and I needed help. That was the saving grace that, honestly, I'm here because of. So, again, did you know that there's a downside to thinking you know? Maybe you don't. This is why I think my mom's teaching me very young to question everything may have been one of the most important gifts she gave me, aside from this existence. So thanks, Mom. She left about 18 years ago, but she's always with me. And yeah, that's right. We never are disconnected, truly. how lucky was I to be given the gift of questioning. If you don't have that, then you can learn it, and it will begin to dissolve the rigidity and the constriction of the believer, which keeps you stuck in separation. Period. Okay, so the advantage of not believing is that you get to find out. Well, why are people so afraid of finding out? Well, because it's scary. Maybe you'll find out something you don't want to find out. Usually what it really is, when you get down to it, as you evolve in this practice, is that that our relative conditioned, identified surviving organism is nothing other than terrified of being infinite consciousness. And that was the final piece when I had that explosion. That was like an infinite nuclear explosion when I was 16. What preceded that was the most overwhelming terror I have ever experienced in my entire life. But I knew I had to die. I just knew it. I don't know how I knew it. Psychic told me later I'd had many lifetimes as a monk, and I knew how to set myself up. But I didn't know anything in this life about that. I just knew intuitively that I didn't have a choice. So I went over. I went over that cliff into oblivion, and it was the most important experience of my life. Which, following it, I won't talk about the details, but one of the things that came was a profound sense of meaning, not intellectual, not cognitive. There was no thinking in it, but there was a sense where before that my life did not have any meaning, and everything felt disconnected. And after that, everything had meaning and was connected and has been ever since. Not in a way that John knows, because John doesn't know. And that force has been a guiding light in my entire life, still is, and this is what I teach, really, is how you can attune to that and begin to follow that. Not follow some belief or teachings or some other person. That's not how it works. No. Only to learn certain skills and practices, maybe, and get the benefit of someone's consciousness, certainly. To let that clear, resonant field help you remember what you truly are. That's the value of what we call transmission of the Dharma. Yes, of course, I had that plenty with my teachers. It works. It's helpful, very helpful. So meaning, the way I am saying it, is the unknowable, unidentifiable, non-cognitive, profound alignment with the evolutionary force, the evolutionary movement of existence. So when you are in these moments, or when you have these moments of connectedness, of no self, those are moments and glimpses of freedom, of your true self, true nature, that cannot be held onto because there's no identity, there's no self. And yet it is what you are fundamentally. Always have been, always will be, whether or not there is consciousness of it, awareness of it. Practice bringing your attention back to the present moment. Over and over again, failing over and over and over again. Evolution is the constant bringing attention, is the constant failure, one failure after another, as evolution literally learns and develops. And you as a relative being are evolving. We all are. And that evolutionary force is the same as spiritual consciousness emerging. It is exactly the same. It is a natural thing. It isn't about whether you believe or not. You know, I've said this before, in case you think it is about belief. It isn't, because there are cave drawings in Africa 17,000 years ago that depict Kundalini energy and connection to the source. Of course. Always. So, how are we doing with time? Good. I'm going to just finish with a final bit here. I want to talk about the dark night of the soul. Basically, let's just say it another way. When you're having a hard time, when life sucks, maybe that's how it is right now. I get it. Important to feel it, express it, do what you can to make whatever improvements and changes you can do. No problem. Clear all of that. It still may be the dark night of the soul. I have a student who's worked with me for many years, and she's a very mature great-grandmother and wonderful psychologist and beautiful teacher in her own right. And I remember she was completely plugged into presence and then lost it for years and stayed with it. And I helped her through it. It can take, we can go through periods of disconnection that can be very difficult, even though we've already had profound awakening and even enlightenment experiences, of course. And this is very natural. I just want to say the dark night of the soul is a cycle. It's not a moment in time. It's a description of a process that actually is evolution. And I guarantee you, it sucks and you'll hate it. And it will floor you, it will depress you, it will freak you out, it will turn you into a heroin addict, it will do all kinds of things. God forbid, whatever. But you know what I mean? It will promote profound compulsive avoidance and all of it because it's so overwhelming. And you'll be disillusioned, discouraged, resentful, distrustful, all of it. What's important is when you realize, because people say, you know, I feel like I've been practicing forever and I feel like I haven't gotten anywhere. That's the cycle that I'm talking about. Because when you get back to the certain beginning point, it feels like you didn't get anywhere. Guess what? The downside of thinking you know, maybe you're wrong. And I have to tell you, you are. Because there is no going backwards and there is no stasis. There is nothing that doesn't keep changing on a relative level. That was the teaching of the Buddha. And the cause of suffering is people are trying to keep it from changing. If you know the Four Noble Truths, that's true. So, okay. The value of this is developing compassion and loving kindness and forgiveness and even gratitude and even asking deeply for help when you are in despair, when you are hopeless, when you are desperate. And I've been there many times. And I have to tell you, as my practice evolved and as consciousness became more and more embodied in this human being, through some of the most difficult experiences that anybody would have to go through that I've been through, it was there for me every single time. Every time. And still is. My life sometimes is very difficult, challenged, just because I'm a human being with life challenges. We all are. So this is important to begin to have this understanding. You know, I don't know if you've ever, I like to use the example in case you like to go to museums and you've been to New York City and you've been to the Guggenheim, which is such an extraordinary building. If you haven't been there, if you ever go there and you'll see or look at pictures of it. But it's basically a kind of circular, it's a spherical building. Okay. And the galleries are built off a spiral ramp that slowly goes up to the top, right? It's very cool. And what's interesting is that evolution is like a spiral. It's interesting how many things are spirals in terms of natural growth and plant growth. So, but it's very much like that. So that you go and you actually go up the spiral and you're one level up, but you might think like you're at the same place that you were before, but you're actually a level up. So I like to use that example of evolution. It looks like you're in the same place, but that's only the one who thinks they know. So keep questioning. Because when you're the knower and the believer, you're at war with yourself and everything else. And that's where you practice. That's where you gently bring attention as kindly, with sensitivity, and however you can, and over and over and over again, instead of trying to get a result, trying to be in presence, trying to hold on to groovy openness and open-heartedness and acceptance. No. Those are not any part of your identity ego. Those will naturally, the fragrance of evolution will naturally envelop you and everyone without you ever even thinking about it. And if you get caught up in the identity of that, you will end up having what is called in Zen, the stink of Zen, which is basically is an amusing word for the spiritual identified ego, the spiritually identified ego, the greatest pitfall on the path of the believer. Yeah, the most unconscious ego identity and the most dangerous in history to this day. And it's that internalized, what I call your internal fundamentalist, is what you need to start opening to and becoming aware of, because that's the cause of the trauma. Okay? The trauma that continues, that's self-generated.